Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin, the standalone expansion, new set, whatever you want to call it, for Tainted Grail from Awakened Realms. And the disclaimer is a bit more complicated for this one. They sent me an almost complete, almost finished prototype of the first 5 chapters, so half or slightly more than half of the game content. And I've played through every single bit of that content to prepare for this, but I have not played the exact final product, and I have not played every single mission in the story. But with that info out of the way, the original Tainted Grail I loved, and then the grind started to get to me. In my preview of Kings of Ruin, I said it was a vast improvement. Does that still hold true now that I've played a lot more of it? Let's find out and get to the list. So my number 5 point is focused on the different characters you can play in the game, and this is generally a pro for my taste. So there are 4 different characters you control. They each have their own ongoing abilities that affect the way you are moving around and exploring. They each have unique diplomacy and combat decks, and each one has sort of their own mechanic. It's not too diverse, but like some of them are, waiting for tokens to fire off, and some of them are getting bonuses from hurting themselves, that kind of thing. And each have their own level up skills, although I will say some of them just seem weaker than others, so I'm not sure you'll consistently use them all. But the part I like best, that definitely pushes this to a pro, is that they each have a compelling reason to want to travel in the world you're in, kind of their own unique side quest they're going after. And even though I've only played half the game, each of the ones I've played has had pretty meaningful narrative beats already, and it's really interesting to follow along with, so that's a big win in my book. My number 4 point goes down to a mix for my taste, and that's the grind in the game. And this is a pretty important one to talk about because this was what put me off of Tainted Grail. After a very positive review, the grind started bothering me too much. So if you've seen the original Tainted Grail, there were these menhirs you had to light up, and it was very expensive. You had to spend food every day, and it was like very tough to backtrack. And that's mostly been fixed with this new mechanic where you can always move through places, but they'll be in this weirdness cloud, and until you put down the figures to kind of clean it up, then you can't explore fully. You'll be taking like a bunch of sanity. So it's nice that it frees you up to explore pretty well. And they also took away the need to eat food every day. So you're definitely grinding for resources less. And also I'll give a compliment to the story decks. They tend to be very focused and a bit more linear. I'll discuss that in a minute. So you don't tend to be wasting a lot of time with like backtracking and going back and forth. But still, that being said, once you get a lot of guardians on the board, which are monsters like traveling around and bothering you, and once you get the Kings of Ruin, the big bad bosses of this set chasing after you, and then also some moments in the chapters I've played will have some grind. So the grind is not gone, and sometimes you're going to get frustrated. You just want to like move and have some more exploration, and you have to like fight and get out of things. But it's definitely a billion times better than it was in the original Tainted Grail. For my number 3 point, I'm looking at the core combat and diplomacy mechanic. And this one is a bit of a mix for my taste. So the basic idea how it works is you're linking up these different keys and trying to get in combat as many red symbols as you can. In diplomacy, you're trying to raise up this little track to become more friendly with them. And you can try to combo a bunch of cards in a row to get different like cool effects to go off. But then every time you stop comboing based on where you've gotten, the enemy's going to attack back. So it's a cool and thoughtful system. And I will call out that when you're doing co-op, you switch back and forth between each other. So you need to be like talking and making sure that your cards will combo into the other person's cards. So it works pretty well there. But all that being said, this goes down to a mix for me because sometimes the combat and the diplomacy kind of wear out their welcome. A lot of times the fights will be super easy and it'll feel like you kind of wasted time figuring out how to do your icons, or they'll be super tough and kind of frustrating. Now, as you level up, it does get way better. You unlock tons of cool things, like I mentioned with the characters earlier. So there is a lot to build into here, but yeah, it's not always fun for me. But for my number 2 point, I'm back to a full pro for my taste, and that's the exploration and the sense of mystery in the game. This is one of the things Awakened Realms does best. This reminds me a bit of ISS Vanguard. So as you are exploring around the world, it's cool just to kind of see which places pop up. The whole weird or no mechanic is cool, and they do clever things where like sometimes you want to be in a place that is weirded out. That's not the right way to say it. And sometimes you don't. And then without any spoilers, I'll say that in pretty much every chapter you play, again, I've played through half of the game, there are really compelling mysteries, and you're almost never going to figure out everything, and you're going to have to like make different calls, and I can see like replaying the game to see like what the rest of the mystery was and figure out the rest of the puzzle. So there's some really neat things going on here to kind of keep you coming back and giving you that sense of exploration and discovery. And that goes right into my number 1, kind of connected to my number 2, and that's the narrative and the sense of choice in the game. And for my taste, this is a full pro, but this is very much into my taste. I want to make that clear because this is a more linear experience than the original Tainted Grail, than something like Seventh Continent. They did what I think is a really good job of making each chapter fairly self-contained. Usually you'll only be going through maybe like 6 to 10 locations, so you don't have sort of the wide breadth of the entire world to walk around in if you don't want to. And the narrative is consistently interesting and excellent. I think the key conceit here, where this one is a very different story than Tainted Grail. Your characters are kind of going into the weirdness and becoming corrupted by it or not, and deciding like how they want to deal with these kings of ruin and trying to find King Arthur. It's a really cool narrative overall. And one of the things I like best as a longtime choose your own adventure story fan is that this has branching choices, but they aren't crazy branching. Again, you have the same basic like linear stuff going on. You're going to go through the same basic thing, but there are lots of interesting endings to like each chapter and ways you can go, lots of choices you can make for your individual characters. They still use from Tainted Grail the really cool status system where you're marking off things and that'll control kind of what you see. And again, there's a lot of replay here. I mean, it's a very linear game, but at the same time, you could definitely go through at least twice, if not 3 times, to try to see the different choices, the different endings, the different characters, and how they play out. So overall, you might want to check out Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin. First of all, if you were originally a Tainted Grail fan, I think this is the same kind of stuff, only better. Additionally, if you like epic adventure games with really strong narrative, a lot of interesting reading, cool characters, an interesting combat system, even though it sometimes overstays its welcome, I think all of those are things to love about this game. On the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you didn't like Tainted Grail, although the grind is much lessened, so if that was your only problem with the game, then you might want to look at Kings of Ruin. Additionally, if you don't want to read a lot, if you don't want to game that's going to take a while and sometimes has some grindy, slower parts, this one might be too epic for your taste. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.